Coming up today, it's episode 106 of In the Front Row with Mike Vaccaro. Our guest is former Pro Bowl NFL wide receiver Herman Moore. Moore shares his journey with us from Danville, Virginia to the University of Virginia and a first-round pick, 10th overall, by the Lions in 1991, where he played the majority of his career. Also played alongside some great quarterbacks and a very good running back, Hall of Famer Barry Sanders, who rushed for over 2,000 yards in 1997. And it is Herman Moore who has his shoes. He tells us about that story. Tells us about his journey and also about the curse of Bobby Lane. Is it real? Stay with us to find out. Herman Moore, our guest, episode 106 of In the Front Row with Mike Vaccaro. Well, Herman, thanks so much for joining us here today. We kind of pushed us back to after the Super Bowl. We were hoping to talk about a Lions Super Bowl championship. Didn't quite happen, but still, Detroit and the Lions, and your connection with them still seems to be very incredible right now.
It is. I stay very much connected to the team. I stay very much connected to what's happening around the organization for the most part. You know, it's a lot that has happened and transpired over the last few years with Coach Campbell and his staff, also with Brad Holmes and everything that he's done upstairs. And when you combine all of those things, just to see the success that the team has had is nothing short of just absolutely fantastic. And it's reignited the fan base here. It's reignited the alumni interest in being a part and around some of the activities. I think the organization has done some things to try and elevate that in the fan experience. So it's been a all around big deal over the last few years for everyone.
And you seem to be a kind of a fan favorite as well. Do you get that sense from the fans that you're one of their favorites out there?
Oh, absolutely. I've been here since I arrived in 1991, and I've stayed very much not just a part of the Lions fan base, but just the communities throughout the state, and not just in Southeast Michigan where Detroit is located or where the team plays. In doing that, I think it's important for us as players when we're done to understand that we transition to a different place. And so there's a different earn that you have to do when it comes to being involved with your community and having them respect you at a different level than just as a player. I think that fades. For me, I think the adulation and the respect comes from the fact that I continue to be a very much part of the business community, but also philanthropic in all the things I'm doing.
Well, for you, it starts in Virginia. And we're going to start there as well. Danville, Virginia, where you were born, where you grew up. You were a three-sport athlete. In your mind, what was your best sport? Obviously, you went professional, played football, but what was your best sport in your mind?
Well, I think that's going to be a little subjective. From my end, I think some people could make an argument that it could be track. Some could make an argument it was basketball, and others would say, from a potential standpoint in high school, it was football. But I think where my talents stood out, probably in my opinion, best was probably on the which floor, on basketball. So being there was a place where I think you could see just kind of my athleticism, my coordination, and those things kind of come all together. That's where I got most of my playing time in front of audiences that allowed me to be out there for an extended period of time. Whereas with football, it was in pockets, as a slash flanker / tight end / kicker / occasional defensive back. You're playing multiple positions, so you're being spread a little bit differently. And then in track and field, coming out and using just the ability to be a high jumper and go over 7 feet was something that hadn't been done at school, and I set all kind of records there. So that was probably one I was most widely attracted to the universities and the different offers from. But ultimately, football was my landing spot. Some I played since I was 6 years old, so I had more time in football than any of the other sports.
It was football, and it was Virginia. Why the University of Virginia? Why was that the best landing spot for you?
Because I ended up decommitting and pulling my commitment to Virginia Tech. I know the Virginia Tech fans don't like to hear that, but I had an admiration and a respect for Coach Frank Beamer. And after meeting with him, I was clear. And then Jimmy Whitten, who was also a former teammate of mine in Virginia at George Washington High School, attended there. So I went there, and ultimately thought that was going to be my landing spot. But then Virginia offered me an opportunity to come and said, hey, you can still take another visit. So I ended up going up to UVA and got with Sean Moore, knew of him from his time at Martinsville, and the rest is history. He promised to throw me the football whenever he became a starter behind Scott Sekiel. So it worked out.
My wife's a Hokie, but don't worry, she doesn't watch this show, so she won't be upset. Over 2,500 receiving yards, 13 touchdowns in 1990. Obviously, that transition from high school to college went pretty smooth, it seems like, for you. Was that the case?
High school to college was a little rough. There were some academic situations I had to overcome with summer school, but I ended up doing that and successfully achieved the opportunity to earn my way into the University of Virginia. But playing, we were stacked, and I ended up having to redshirt my first year. So you're playing and you're practicing, but you're not going to necessarily participate or play. Made me the ultimate teammate. You had to do it, and you had to be unselfish. But I think it was a good thing. It was the right thing that Coach Welsh and his staff put me through, and ultimately it allowed me to focus on school a little bit more. And then from there, when the opportunity presented itself, when Tim Finkelstein got hurt, I went in against Penn State and, never looked back.
6'4", 220. How much did that play into your success, the size you had at that position?
And it was interesting because, there was a focus at that time, obviously, on strength training and conditioning. But when I transitioned from high school to college, it was a little different because we were stepping up a level. So I was pretty much kind of undersized. As you see a lot of players coming out at that time, they ask you to put on more weight. Each time you go from high school to college to professional, your size changes. So I came out of high school, I was probably under 200 pounds. I was 6'4", 6'5". And then I put on a little bit more weight, got up to about 195, 200 pounds in college. And then ultimately when I transitioned from there, the Lions wanted me to play at, over 210, between 210 and 220. And so that's when I ultimately locked in on that size and ultimately played my career at about 220.
And again, for you, an incredible career, a college football Hall of Fame member as well. What do you remember most about your days at Virginia and the success that you had, the team as well?
I remember just being amongst some really talented players. Leadership was tremendous. I didn't realize the depth and the acumen of the coaching staff at that time that we had at UVA. We had some very, very good coaches who ultimately went on to have other successes in other places. But ultimately, they were teachers. They were organized. They also had a vision. That was the other thing that I remember mostly about Virginia, is that they were right on the cusp of having that breakthrough, but, a couple of bowl appearances, but ultimately nothing that really set them apart. And when we came in, we had a young group and we started to recruit really good talent from within the state of Virginia and some other neighboring northern parts of the country, northeast side of the country. And ultimately, we put together a pretty good team that worked well together. And that led us to having success. So I learned a lot, not only just in terms of work ethic, but what the meaning of team was, the commitment to team, and then understanding that, not one person is above everyone.
George Welsh, who played at Navy, did that make things very regimented, very strict in the way he ran things?
No, with Coach Welsh, it was somewhat different, but Ed Martin, who was my high school coach, with Ed Martin, it was different because he was also a very disciplinary type person. I came from basketball with Harry Johnson, who was a very disciplined coach, and he talked about ethics. So coming there was a little change because George Welsh he was more quiet. He didn't have the personality that you would just sit and have just casual conversations with him. But he was well respected. And because of that, that transitioned over and translated into the players who were our leaders. And then that carried its way. So it never felt, whether it was coming from Coach Welsh or was coming from other players, it was always a part of who we were and what the chemistry of our team was.
So your first team All-ACC, All-American, and then the draft gets ready in 1991. What do you hear and where do you think you're going to go?
I had been hearing little bird was in my ear coming in and saying, you know what, you're definitely top one, top two receivers. And at that time, it was going to be myself, Alvin Harper, Rocket Ismail, and Randall Thrill Hill were the ones mainly being talked about in the first round. Obviously, there was a lot of receivers that ended up going in the first round, but that I may be the first receiver taken. And the chatter at that time was Denver was going to take me with the fourth pick, which I went out to visit, met with Coach Reeves. A lot of people don't know that story, so there's a whole lot more to that one. But and if it wasn't there, it was going to be Dallas and so on and so forth. So I knew the teams where I was going to be locked in that needed receivers. And I was pretty excited about it. Had an opportunity to get an agent, Brad Blank. And from there, he had some other former UVA players at the time who were already in the NFL. So it was a trust factor there. And I knew I was going to be slotted in the first round. I would have been disappointed if I didn't go in the first round.
Yeah, 10th overall, and it was the Detroit Lions, head coach Wayne Fonte. So you get that call. It's Detroit, not the teams you were mentioning there. What's going through your mind?
A lot's going through my mind, but in all transparency, Coach Fonte, he came to visit me at Virginia. I had my pro day, and I ran some routes. I worked with the quarterbacks. I did the 40-yard dash, and then I elected not to do anything at the combine other than get measurements and weight. And I think I did the bench press and some other things, but outside of that was pretty much it. But he came, and I thought he was going to work me out at Scott Stadium, and he didn't. He just basically walked around the field with me talking for about 15 minutes. And he says, I've already seen enough film. He says, what I'm going to do is I'm here just to meet you in person to let you know we're going to take you. If you're there at the 10th pick, we're going to take you. And of course, I was like, how do you believe that? I don't know this man, but I'm probably naive and all those things. And I was like, I took it at face value and felt that I was going to end up there if one of the other teams didn't take me.
What was he like as your coach once you actually get drafted and get signed by the Lions?
Once I was drafted by Detroit, Coach Fonte was exactly what he had presented himself as. He was a player's coach, but he was a person who really leaned heavily on self-discipline. I think he looked for players who could be self-starters and leaders, first and foremost of their work ethic and their character. And then from there, be able to bring that into a team facility and kind of a setup that he had there. But more importantly, I think with Coach Fonte, he had a vision. He felt that we were right there having the ability with a few more players and a few more pieces to be a championship caliber team, which ultimately came true and to fruition in 1991, winning the NFC Central at the time, and then ultimately going to the playoffs.
And winning a playoff game, the first time since 1957. So what was that experience like? And again, you're new to Detroit, but knowing that fan base had been starving for success and seeing it happen in your first year.
Being that the first year, my rookie year, I came out, I was highly touted, and I was supposed to be this game changer, myself and another gentleman who was actually another highly rated receiver, Reggie Barrett, of Texas El Paso. And we were probably the two top receivers in the draft. And ending up on the same team and ultimately coming into a run and shoot system. I don't think that necessarily fit he and I initially, but we came in and we both had a terrible first year. And ultimately, I didn't get a chance to start until really the playoffs, and came in because Robert Clark was hurt. And that was my breakout. Caught my first touchdown. It kind of solidified the dependability that they needed at the position, at the Z position. So it was a bittersweet first year for me because I wanted to do more. I wanted to really come out and make the fans feel that I was the right choice. But I know there was some doubt. There was some rightfully so, because I didn't play my best and I wasn't when I was given the opportunities. So ultimately, Wayne, Coach Fonte, decided to hold me back. And I think that was the right decision. I didn't agree with it at the time, but they purposely said, you know what, we're just going to bring you along a little bit slower.
Yeah, obviously it worked out. When you look back, four-time Pro Bowler, right? And did that with a lot of different quarterbacks as well. We were just watching some of the highlights before you came on. Is it hard as a receiver when that quarterback position is so important, but it is changing throughout your career?
It's a tough It's a tough thing to go through as a receiver. There's so much of the receiver and quarterback success is built on rapport. It's built on the fact that you have to learn each other, you have unspoken communication, and that you take the time to really work through some of the challenges or understanding both strengths and weaknesses of each. And for me, it was hard to do that because there was no stabilization at the quarterback position. We literally had 4 guys, 3 that we rotated in with Rodney Peete, Eric Kramer, and Andre Ware. And then ultimately, I still struggled with that for the next 3 years until Scott Mitchell came along. And then once he came there, I played with him for a solid 2 years, 2.5 years, and then ultimately finished up with Charlie Batch. But along that way, I think there was probably 15 quarterbacks that I played with. So trying to find that consistency, I had to find it within and just say, no matter who's there, I just need to catch the ball. and that was my way of working through it and maintaining consistency over the volatility that we had at the quarterback position.
But I would think the ball comes out of their hands differently, though, right? Was there one that I don't want you to throw anybody under the bus, but one that you preferred more, one that you think that threw a better ball that really helped you out?
Probably the 2 best were Eric Kramer. He was the right hand. And then the next one was Scott Mitchell, who was the lefty. I'd never caught passes from a left-hander, but that was probably my preference now. It's probably my favorite. And I can understand why Jerry Rice and some of his other players really enjoyed Steve Young. I also had a chance to catch a touchdown from him at the Pro Bowl. And, so it was different because the ball turns kind of in towards your hands, whereas it actually pulls away a little bit from a righty. So being on the right side and Scott throwing it from the left to the right, it was like a perfect pass. The ability to catch it was a lot easier. And then being that he was a bigger quarterback made it even more of an advantageous piece for me, especially down the field or over the middle.
Yeah, your first team All-Pro several times. Is there a year in your mind that sticks out to you as your best season?
Wow. I would say it's doing my Pro Bowl years, yes, but my overall is really the 1991, just understanding everything I had to go through, because that becomes a foundation that gave me everything that I need as a player, from a character to humility to dependability, accountability. It was so many things that I had to know I had to build on. It became the base of my foundation. But in terms of my success years, because I only started for 7 years. Most people don't realize that when I was with the Lions, not 12. I would say probably 95. And it was because it was the ultimate team success in terms of accolades, personal achievements for so many different players, but also as a unit. We were top offense. You had Barry getting his normal 1,500 yards, Brett Perriman over 100 catches, me over 100 catches, 16, almost 1,700 yards on my end, double-digit touchdowns, 1,400 yards for Brett Perriman, almost 1,000 for Johnny Moore. I mean, you can go on and on and on. And then on the defensive side, there was some personal success. We lost in the playoffs against Philadelphia, unfortunately, but ultimately we knew that we could share and still win. But we just got off to a slow start that year and had to win 7 in the end just to get into the playoffs. And I think we were a little exhausted by the time we got in it.
Well, you mentioned 1995. If that jumps off the page to you, how about Thanksgiving 1995 against the Vikings? Big game for you, big game for the receiving corps. Is that one of your favorite games as you look back?
It is, and I remember it because of just the matchup of offenses. We went against Chris Carter and the Vikings and their trio of receivers, their running game, their quarterback, and then you had ours on our side. And it was a shootout. It was a high-scoring game, and ultimately we pulled it off at the end. One thing I remember most about that one, out of all the things that occurred, was Chris Spillman was put in on the Hail Mary play at the end. And, he's there. I don't know what he's there for, but I just remember him coming in, and I was going up to kind of knock the ball down, and Chris just comes in and smashes everybody. He just hits the whole pile. And I'm sitting there going, man, I guess no one was going to catch the pass. But what a big game. Thanksgiving at the time was the game for the Lions. Coach Campbell, obviously, now that you look at it, it becomes an important game. But for us, it was kind of that championship type game for the Lions.
Yeah, maybe has lost a little luster because there's games on Thursday nights throughout the year as well. But again, that was the big day. And obviously John Madden was a big part of that as well. Do you have any Madden memories from your Thanksgiving games that you played?
Not much other than just going back and hearing his iconic voice and all those that have ever sat in that booth. And I always tell people I haven't released it to people yet. I'm working on a couple of nostalgic things to give back to the fan base, because I do so much in terms of involvement with our fans. Is looking at the time they didn't have the digital boards. They would hand write them out on a kind of a 17 by 14 like sheet of cardboard paper. And I remember going up to the booth and asking him and those guys to sign the card and if I could have it. So I still have the original, and then look at all the notes they had taken on all the players and including myself. And it's those type of memories that take me back and make me really enjoy the time when it was a very personal side to the game. You got to know the people in the booth, and they came to the meetings to meet you, and you establish these long-term relationships.
Obviously, you have a lot of relationships. One of them, I'm sure, with Barry Sanders. We haven't talked about him yet, but having him on your team, how does somebody like him make you better as a receiver?
Well, it makes you better because you're definitely going to be in shape, because he may start out right and he's coming left, and you may have to go all the way across the field to catch that one block that springs him. And we prided ourselves on that. And sometimes we wanted to be on the opposite side of the field. Barry goes right, we're on the far left, and see who can get over and get to the safety that ultimately gets him out of the way for Barry. Electric player. Unfortunately, I tell people, the receivers, if you're doing your job, you never get to see Barry's best runs live, because it's always behind you and you're doing your job. So I always had to look up at the highlights or catch it on the news later that evening when people said, "Did you see that run?" Well, no, really, I didn't. I'll have to catch it. And that's what only thing I miss. I miss most of them live.
That's crazy. Your highlight of Barry Sanders is blocking for him. That's crazy from a receiver. The pride that you took in that.
Yeah, absolutely. You couldn't be a part of our unit if you did not block. And wow, Barry. I mean, what can't you say about him that is this special and fantastic? The consummate professional, teammate, leader by example, professionalism. I still disagree. If he doesn't want to spike the ball, doesn't mean that if you spike the ball that Barry's a better guy. I think we all celebrate different. That's the only thing I always, give it to like you've been there before. No, I may not come back. Barry will be back. I may not be back. So I'm spiking the ball. I'm gonna do a little whatever I gotta do. Call me a diva. Call me whatever you want. Don't care.
No, you're just a receiver. You're not a diva.
Yeah. Where'd that even come from anyway? Come on, Mike. Where'd that even come from?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Terrell Owens, not you.
Yeah. I don't have popcorn and I don't have marks.
That's right.
My pants. So, yeah.
97, obviously, he's at that time just a third running back to rush for over 2,000 yards. He does that against the Jets. You have his shoes. Do you still have his shoes? And how did you get his shoes from that moment?
Yeah, I still do. So I remember when he broke the record, he was running, and ironically, who was it? Aaron Glenn, who was the one who made the tackle. And I can't outrun Aaron Glenn. I'm not even going to, I think he may have run by me and he may have been the guy to tackle him. But when we came in and everyone's celebrating, Barry's lockers directly beside mine, and we were sitting there, he was taking off his shoes. And I said, I don't even know why I asked for him, but I just said, "Hey, man, let me have those shoes." And he was like, "Sure, here, take them." And I said, "Why don't you go ahead and sign them?" And he signed and dated them. I think it was the 12/27 as when he broke the record. So I have those, and I keep those kind of hidden away. I know the Pro Football Hall of Fame had asked for them to put inside of that little case at one time on consignment. I wouldn't let them have that. The Lions asked for them. I wouldn't let them have it. Barry's never asked for them, and I probably wouldn't let him have me without him, cutting me a check. He's gonna have to cut me a check for those.
That's some big time mementos right there. These shoes from Barry Sanders. Again, an incredible career with Detroit, 1991 to 2001. you had all the records, all the receiving records, before this guy, Calvin Johnson, came along. But what did it mean to you to leave there, your time in Detroit, with those records?
It means that during my time, I did what I was supposed to. It's great to see, because that's kind of, if you look at how it should, and it kind of happens, if you want to make sure you always have legacy players in each of your decades during their tenure, when you pick certain players that become iconic or become legends within your organization, you expect that type of return. And I think that's what we've seen, whether it was Charlie Sanders, who had it before then, he's a Hall of Famer. And then I broke Charlie Sanders' records. Okay. I hope one day get my Hall of Fame mention. Then there's Calvin Johnson. He breaks my records, and now he's in the Hall of Fame. And then you have a young man by the name of Amon-Ra St. Brown right now, who is on that path and that trajectory to surpass even some of my records if he continues to have that consistency over the next 4 or 5 years. And then he can then test even Calvin's records if he stays and has longevity. So that's the way it's supposed to be in there. So it meant a lot that it came from a player like him, and then watching how he transformed the game as well and continue with that big receiver legacy. That was cool.
Again, you mentioned the Hall of Fame. Why are we not hearing Herman Moore's name mentioned for Hall of Fame? I mean, wide receiver seems like it's such a crowded room for the Hall of Fame, but why do we never hear Herman Moore's name mentioned?
I think I got lost in a time frame and an era where you had a guy like Barry Sanders, you had Jerry Rice and Chris Carter's, and Michael Irvin in a lot of these games, especially when you think of Michael Irvin and Jerry Rice. These are guys who were winning Super Bowls as well. And even guys who were winning Super Bowls who didn't have the same type of receivers or had the numbers that I had, they had Hall of Fame quarterbacks that were being followed in their offenses. So it was just one of those things. I just don't think if people do their math and they go and look at the history and they put the numbers together, I don't think it's hard. It's not a stretch to make a rationalization, a reason why I should be in the Hall of Fame from my era, because that's the only time I can play. And when I did it, I used to back away from that question or back away from it, but not any longer, because your legacy, if you're not willing to push it and you're not willing to make a case for yourself, then why should someone else? And right now, I definitely will stand up and say, put any of the guys that are there, because there are guys that are in front of me and behind me that made it to the Hall. So how do you jump over me in my time frame to make it happen? I don't care what the guys are doing today. Their numbers are their numbers, but my numbers in my time frame allows me to compete with the other players.
670 receptions, not over 9,000 yards, 62 touchdowns. I mean, incredible numbers, again, that have been surpassed by somebody who is in the Hall of Fame. You get in some other Hall of Fames, Virginia Sports Hall of Fame, Michigan Sports Hall of Fame, not the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but that's going to be nice accomplishments and nice honors to have as well.
It would be nice to have, but I'll have to say I would be disappointed if I was not to get in at some point, even if it's on the legacy side. But I think it definitely is something that I've deserved, and I can make my own case about it. I've looked at it objectively, and I've also done my math and my numbers, and I've stacked my things up against all the ones that are in. And I can only start the 7 years that they put me on the field. Some of that is up to the players, some of it is up to the coaches, and the time that they gave me. You'd be hard pressed to find more than 2 guys that you can place ahead of me during my era.
Well, again, hopefully that day comes at some point for you. We'll certainly be rooting for you. As you said, you're still around. You're still involved with the franchise there. What else are you doing in the area? Tell us a little bit more about current day Herman Moore.
Well, I've become very entrepreneurial. I tell people that I've now been in business for over 20 plus years, a couple decades. Coming up probably soon on my next few years, probably my 30th year. So this is where I've really cut my teeth after playing, and I'm very committed to being a business owner, being an entrepreneur, having some very high-level partnerships and strategic partners, but having vertically integrated businesses. We definitely stay at go. We control a lot what we do in manufacturing and print-on-demand services, experiential marketing, and things of that nature. So we have pretty vast services that we work with and clientele, but also I think more importantly, the philanthropic side of it with my Tackle Life Foundation and what we do with supportive mental health services as well as entrepreneurship.
Also, you do some stuff following the Lions. You have Lions Nation Unite. Tell us about that.
Oh, so Lions Nation Unite has been started out as a passion project. I partnered with a young lady. Her name is Chrissy Zavakar, who used to work with the Lions and handle all of their social media, started their social media really platform going when she was there for about 7 to 10 years. And then we've grown that to make it really a landing spot for the Lions fan base. That's why I mainly engage them. And we look to just elevate them, elevate content creators, share my platform, share who I am and what I have access to with them. And that's been fun. So I'm actually going to replicate that and have Who's Nation Unite. That's coming out soon. So I want to get the alum back involved because I know it's important to keep legacy and keep our alums involved and keep our fans at the paramount of what we do, because that's what makes it go when it comes outside of the field side of it.
You mentioned Chrissy. She helped organize our sit down here today. So we thank her for doing that for us here today. Again, the Lions, different Lions these days, but I got to ask you about the curse of Bobby Lane. Does it exist? Is it real? What did you learn about that from the fan base who kind of maybe leans on that a little bit?
I heard about the curse of Bobby Lane, and a lot of people think that's still real, and it's just hanging over. But I would want to not believe that this is a bitten team. That at some point the Super Bowl is going to come calling, and that evasive championship will be there for an organization that deserves it. The players deserve it. The coaches I've seen come through, and I know right now everyone's excited about what Coach Campbell and the team is doing now, but there have been some great coaches that have come through here with Coach Caldwell, Jim Caldwell, Jim Schwartz, even going back to my time with Wayne Fonts. I mean, there are some people who really deserve to have had an opportunity to have a Super Bowl teams. So the curse, it's got to be lifted. So I'm getting rid of the curse. The curse is going away. Go away, curse. Respect to Bobby Lane, but we got to do something. These other guys deserve it. Everyone deserves to have their day.
Yeah, Bobby Lane, great Lion who was traded, and after that, supposedly the curse has started. But you mentioned Dan Campbell and some of the coaches. He's had some great coaches on his staff that have gone on to head coaching jobs. Have you ever entertained being a coach yourself?
What I had, interestingly enough, I had asked a few times with the Lions that, when they've had other coaches that were there about the opportunities to coach there and be a part of the organization, even if it's on an assistant side or just learning it. And it wasn't received at the time. Maybe it just wasn't the right time based on the staff and the coaching personnel that were there during those times. And so it never materialized. So that's when I moved on and decided to get into business. And I say that in transparency because I did try both there and at UVA, and it just, the opportunities weren't there. So I would have loved to have done it. I think it would have been a something I would have really been passionate about. And I still at this point have a lot of interest and passion in being around the players and teaching them not just how to handle what's on the field, but how that is going to help them transition when it's all over by what they do now and what they establish as players. Those are the work ethics that have to be put in place that ultimately make them the solid people.
Yeah, I think you've chosen the right path. Business, you're doing all right for yourself. Maybe we'll see you on the sidelines, but again, hopefully we'll see you at some point in the Hall of Fame as well. I'm sure, if you get that call, is it already in your mind what part of that speech might be?
I got a whole lot.
Have you allowed yourself to think that far ahead?
I have. I've played it over and over, and trust me, it won't be a long speech. It will be very entertaining, and it will be memorable.
Just like this. Just like this.
So I'll keep everybody waiting. Just but hopefully that doesn't scare them off and say we don't know if we want to put this guy in because we don't know what he's going to say. But no, it'll be a memorable moment.
Well, again, your career, your numbers speak for themselves. Again, hopefully you get that call at some point. But Herman, I appreciate your time here today. Great to hear your story from you. And again, boy, looking at your highlights before you came on, amazing career that you had, and certainly honored to have you join us here today.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it. Anytime. Thank you.
Well, another great guest, another great story told here. Herman Moore, we thank him for his time. Special thank you to Chrissy Zabakar for helping arrange our sit-down with him today. As always, we thank you for watching and for listening, and we invite you to subscribe, to like, and to share our podcast and these great interviews with these outstanding athletes like Herman Moore. For JR Equipment, our creator and producer, director behind the scenes, I'm Mike Vaccaro. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Another episode of In the Front Row with Mike Vaccaro. Have a great day, everybody.